All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. We had such a good response to our Facebook Live last week on Giving Tuesday that we wanted to do another one. And we had the perfect opportunity to bring in one of our board members and reporter and weekend anchor from Action News, Jacksonville, Lorena Inclan. Thank you for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. It's our first Facebook
It's
Live.
our first Facebook Live
We've
here.
been partners for a long time, but first Facebook Live, I'm excited.
Yeah, we wanted, because we were getting so much reaction to our Giving Tuesday, we thought, let's take some of these cases that we have partnered with and shared through the media over the last year plus, and use Facebook Live as an opportunity to reshare those stories, talk about a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff that you and I have had a part of that doesn't always make it into the final edit and the final segment. So kind of just as a background, when I started Project Cold Case, you and I had known each other a little bit from the last organization I worked with, and we had done a couple of interviews in the past. And I would always reach out to Lorena anytime Project Cold Case had an event or was doing anything, and you always showed up. Never with a camera, never with an agenda, always just as support for the organization and what we were trying to accomplish. You saw the value in it. I saw your commitment and your passion to helping these families, and I noticed it. I brought it up to the board of directors for Project Cold Case, and said, we need someone from the media that can help us kind of navigate those processes of journalism and give us some insight that we don't already have. And I proposed that be you. The board unanimously agreed. We asked you if you would be interested, and luckily you came on. You've been a great asset, to Project Cold Case since then. And along the way, you and your husband have just been completely supportive, always with any opportunity. And when we talked about doing a partnership where we could bring cases to Action News and you could do stories on them, something really special was born. And so everybody knows to tune in to Action News for their Project Cold Case segment, which happens pretty regularly. Things sometimes come up, but we try to do a couple of cases a month. We try to follow up with a podcast that Action News produces. And we have had law enforcement partner with us as they've sometimes seen the value in having a seat at that table. So we've done stories with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, with the Baker County Sheriff's Office, and St. Johns County, and Jackson Beach PD.
And St. Augustine PD.
And St. Augustine PD. So that has been really great for the Northeast Florida segment. And as Project Cold Case is national as well, our goal is that other reporters will see what you've been able to accomplish and bring to the table, and maybe they'll reach out and we can help facilitate interviews with some families in their area as well. It's obviously a big tool, and because you get comments on your Facebook sites.
Yes, people have a lot of interest, and I'm just so thankful to be able to help out and to be in partnership with you. I've always believed in your mission from day one. When you told me that there are killers out there maybe standing behind you in the grocery store line or at the bank, it really hit me that this is a problem that everybody needs to be aware of, not just people who are personally impacted by crime like you have been. This is something that we all need to be aware of and try to help out. And what better tool than TV, social media, radio, podcasts, everything. The whole goal is to get more eyes on a case, and that is what's really needed, especially in the cold case arena. And I really am thankful that we're able to partner up and show these cold cases, at the very least, get people talking about it. And you never know. And like you always say, you only need just one person to take a look at it. And that person could crack the cold case.
Absolutely. We talk about cases that are decades old that some have never seen media spotlight, or maybe they got a paragraph in the local newspaper, in 1984 when it happened, and that may have been it, and particularly in a city our size with the violence that we have, with new violent cases happening regularly. It's hard for the media to keep track of all the ones that that they've reported on in the past that may not have had an arrest yet. So that's where we come in, and we're able to kind of help out, bring either new awareness or renewed awareness for those cases. And we're going to talk about one of those right now that we did with you in partnership. And I'm going to give a little bit of background, and then we're going to play the segment, the follow-up segment that you just aired on Action News, Jax, a week or two ago.
It was last week, I believe. It was Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yes.
So as the way things work with Project Cold Cases, families are allowed to submit their loved ones' cases to us. And a while back, we received a case for Carol Ann Barrett from her sister. And Carol Ann Barrett was from another state, and she was just graduating high school, and she and her friends drove down to Daytona Beach for spring break, which in 1980 was the place to be.
Yes. And it still is in some ways.
It still is in some ways. Unfortunately, while her and her friends were having fun and being young and carefree in Daytona Beach, someone burst into their hotel room, held them hostage, basically. And I can't remember exactly for how long. I'm sure it seemed like forever to those victims, but it was a significant amount of time that they were held in the hotel room. And when the suspect did finally leave, he took Carol Ann Barrett with him. She was 18 years old. Her friends reported to police what happened, and unfortunately the next morning, Carol's body was found off the side of Interstate 95 here in Jacksonville, just an hour and a half north of where she had been staying in Daytona, and she had been murdered. So that was the initial, basically the information that we received, and the family reached out and they basically said, we don't know who to contact law enforcement wise to get information, because this happened in Daytona, but her body was found in Jacksonville. Who is investigating the case? Who can we call and get some information and ask on an update? And quite honestly, we weren't sure. When someone's abducted from one jurisdiction and then found deceased in another, that was information we didn't really have. So we started calling around, making contact, and we were able to find out that while Daytona Beach Shores PD or whatever it was, their jurisdiction was investigating a kidnapping, an abduction. The murder investigation was being investigated by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and they, of course, were working together with the neighboring jurisdiction. That led to a sketch.
Yes.
At the time was a pencil sketch of a suspect that multiple witnesses had plenty of time to look at and ID. We were able to give that information to the family, and then only to kind of find out that there may have been some information in the case that could be re-looked at after so many years. And so the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office took the investigative part from there, and they were kind of reopening the case to take another look at it. In the meantime, our partnership, we decided to all sit down, the Sheriff's Office, you, myself, and to call the family and do an interview.
And this was the first cold case we did in our partnership.
Right. And as the way some things sometimes have a way of happening, Carol's sister kind of had cold feet and second thoughts, and was
which is understandable.
Which is completely understandable. Yes. She was nervous and scared and feared for her safety. Because this person is still out there, presumably this person could still be out there. Yeah. And the last thing this person probably wants is somebody bringing it back up 38 years later that he's still out there. So there was some understandable hesitation with Carol's sister. But we had already done the interview with law enforcement, with us. Yep.
And there was some interesting information that law enforcement gave us that said that there was an unresolved palm print in the evidence, and now with the new technology in 2018, potentially could be useful.
And as we know from another case that was 43 years
Yes.
old here in Jacksonville, it was an unresolved palm print and fingerprints that solved that that cold case. So it definitely generated interest. It was a case that not only you and I, but law enforcement felt like had some potential to be solved. And so we did what we do, which is try to get that information out there. And you did the story without the family
Yes.
at that time. And with a note that, we tried to contact the family
Yes.
and that they were scared. Little did we know that there was other family members that were out there that saw the segment and that were willing to come forward and were willing to talk.
Including her brother and her niece,
And her
who
niece.
you're going to see in the updated story that we did last week. Her
Right,
niece.
right. So we let the investigative process kind of do its thing, and then we decided, with some of the information that the investigation had come up with and this new composite that they had done, that it would be valuable to do a follow-up and to get the family perspective. So let's show that
Yes.
latest segment, and then I want to talk a little bit about your interview with the company that updated that composite, and then our new relationship with the family as well. So can we do that?
News Jax first told you about the murder of 18-year-old Carol Ann Barrett last year. Her case has not been solved, and now a new photo could make the difference. Action News Jax Lorena Inclan shows us how technology could help solve this cold case.
Take a look at this sketch. Action News Jax showed it to you last year in November. And now, look at this one, a new and improved composite of the same suspect. It's all thanks to St. Augustine-based Face Logics.
Basically, what we're looking for is the points of the face, and we're almost going to do like a manual facial identification.
This is the person JSO says is suspected of killing 18-year-old Carol Ann Barrett during a spring break trip in Daytona Beach. Her body was found off of I-95 near Jacksonville's airport. For Carol's niece, Claire Gilligan, this new composite changes everything.
It definitely looks like an actual person. It's not just, a pencil and paper, kind of thing. I actually thought it looked a lot like my aunt's ex-boyfriend.
Face Logics showed us how many other composites they've created that have been successful. The St. Augustine Police Department already works with Face Logics on some of its cases, and Rousseau tells me it's been working with departments across the state of Florida and also some federal agencies as well.
So even for smaller agencies, they now have those resources that they wouldn't have before.
38 years later, Barrett's death is still impacting her family, including Gilligan's children.
I don't let certain things happen. I'm very cautious.
Take another good look at this photo. The features are very distinct, down to the mole, and even the clothing he may have been wearing.
What if it's your family? Wouldn't you want closure? Wouldn't you want someone to speak out?
Lorena Inclan, CBS 47, Fox 30, Action News Jax.
All right, so that was the follow-up segment to
Yes.
Carol Barrett's case, which included a composite rendering of the suspect. As you saw, and Clint will pull it up for us so you can see it again too, they took Face Logics, and St. Augustine took a penciled sketch or pen sketch
1980.
from 1980.
Which was pretty decent at the time.
Which was decent.
Yeah.
But they, and I knew a little bit of this background, and you actually went down there and interviewed them for the story, so I'll get you to chime in. But they wanted details that you wouldn't think that a sketch artist would want to know. They wanted to know things like, did you see, was the guy a smoker? Was he a manual laborer? Was he, did he present as a well-educated business person or a street person or a, uneducated? They were asking questions to get a feel for this individual. Was he going to be kind of leathery and,
that all has to do with your look, right? I mean,
Yeah.
smoking has to do with the way that your skin might react or whatever. So all these questions were valid, right? To get a better idea. And maybe back then in 1980, that wasn't the norm. But with technology now, I mean, honestly, I told Face Logics when I interviewed them, I'm like, that composite almost looks like a photograph,
Right.
Like of an actual human, just photo. It's so well done that you look at it and it just makes you stop and really take a look. Like, this might look like someone, you know?
And I want people to remember here, things that like the color of somebody's hair.
Yes.
You're not going to get that in a black and white sketch. So Face Logic was able to do that.
Right.
You know, you think about glasses, are they sunglasses, are they tinted? You know what I mean? Things like that. The color of the outfit he was wearing, all of that stuff was important to the artists at Face Logics, and were utilized in compiling, you know, what this individual looked like at the moment he was committing this crime.
Right. And the clothing too.
The clothing he was
corduroy,
wearing.
you know, the texture in there, it's remarkable. And I mean, it's really, really well done. And I always think about, like, what if they would have had this kind of technology back in 1980? It's possible, nobody will ever know, but it's possible that this case maybe wouldn't have been cold.
Would have been solved. And, you know, another thing for people to remember is, you know, there was one murder victim here, but there were a number of other victims that were in that hotel room that were traumatized during this ordeal. And my understanding is that, you know, at least one of them saw that sketch after you aired that segment, and was impacted by that, as well as the family. You know, it's you're seeing, like you mentioned, kind of a photorealistic representation of the individual that murdered your loved one.
Right. And for the survivors who traumatized you and took your friend, it's, you know, even the niece who we interviewed, who was really young when her aunt died, it kind of jogged her memory too, and she believes it looked like, as you saw in the story, she believed it looked like Carol Ann's ex-boyfriend. Although I'll also add that I spoke to the detective on the case with JSO, and he said that he believes that Carol did not know her attacker. But these are conversations that need to be had, because that tip could lead to somebody else, and so on and so forth. And it's worth expressing, if you're close to the victim, or if you were there, to say, tell us what you think it looks like, you know, even if it's not the person.
Well, you know, an X, why is he an X? That obviously leads you into an investigative path that should be looked into. I agree. I talked to the detectives, and they said, you know, from the reports that we read, we are confident that it was not somebody that Carol knew. Just based on the interaction that they had, and that the other witnesses reported that they had. You know, so that is the detective's job, but that's the whole goal of that composite, is to get people to say, that looks kind of like, you know, so-and-so. Well, let the detectives determine if it's them or not, you know, but let's get the information out there, so that they can eliminate people as well.
Absolutely.
It's a valuable tool that, you know, for us is right in our backyard, Face Logics. You know, and I hope that agencies will see this as an opportunity, you know, to utilize those services, because you know, composites don't really seem to be used as much, you know, these days as they used to be. But with technology, you know, why not use it, especially if you have that kind of detail and information.
Absolutely. And Face Logics takes requests from family members too, not just from law enforcement. This Carol Ann Barrett composite was initiated by law enforcement, but they also work with families, and they get submissions, and they have an artist that they work with in-house, and it's really remarkable what they're able to do with the technology. And if you go on their website, you can see the cases that have been solved where they have the actual mugshot of the suspect next to the composite, and it's remarkable how really closely they were able to, almost right on point, you know.
And I just thought of this while we were in Jacksonville Beach at the police department there, working on an interview for another case. And I remember talking to one of the detectives, and I asked him if he was going to step in for the interview, and he said he couldn't, that he had a meeting that he had to go into, and that was a meeting with Face Logics. Like, Face Logics was presenting to Jax Beach PD that day we were out there for another case. So they are, you know, there are agencies out there that are utilizing them, and hopefully they will continue to. I mean, at this point, you know, our hope and our whole point in doing this Facebook Live is, if somebody recognizes that individual or somebody that looked like that, remember in 1980, you know, not that looks like that today. We're talking 38 years ago, they
Yes.
looked like that.
So it's a challenge,
It-
for sure.
it's a challenge. But if you knew somebody that maybe hung out in Daytona and was obviously traveling that corridor 95 from Daytona and Jacksonville in 1980, and maybe they weren't that good of a person,
Yeah, or you remember something that was
something
said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you saw them somewhere. That information literally could be the difference in
Right.
a 38-year-old cold case being
Right.
solved and not being solved.
And I don't know if we also have Clint over here to the side. I don't know if you can pull up the composite again as we talk, and because it's really interesting and how detailed it is, because this person also has a mole,
Right.
which is a very distinct feature. And I just want to make sure you guys take a good look at it too. And the reddish hair, the aviator sunglasses, the clothing. It's a
Yeah.
very distinct looking person.
Yeah, and,
So-
and this person was hanging out in Daytona during spring break in 1980. So there were a lot of people there. I may not remember a whole lot of their
Right.
trip during
That's
spring break.
true,
But maybe somebody has a picture. I mean, this may be desperation, but you're talking about a 38-year-old cold case. Does somebody take a bunch of pictures of their spring break trip? They were at Treasure Island.
Treasure Island Hotel, which is no longer, it's closed down now.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty popular hotel back then.
Back then,
Yep.
maybe at this point, any way somebody could help
Right.
bring some answers to this family and bring justice. And of course, for us, like we spoke about earlier, this person is potentially still out there. I mean, there's a chance he's deceased or he's incarcerated.
Or maybe, yep.
But at the end of the day, there's also a chance that he's in line behind somebody at the bank right
That's right.
now.
And there's also a good chance that Carol Ann wasn't his only victim.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was a pretty brazen move to take on. Do you remember how many was it? 6?
I
or
believe it
some-
was like 7 people in the
7
hotel
people
room.
total in the hotel room, including some guys. It wasn't just
Right.
all girls
Right.
that he could potentially overpower.
Right.
He took on a pretty big group.
He did.
Which was pretty brazen, and then somehow got her from the hotel during spring break, into a car.
And there's a lot of questions, obviously, and there's a lot of things that JSO won't tell us to preserve the investigation, which is completely understandable too. But obviously, the big question is, the motive. Why Carol Ann? Why did he want her? And what did he want with her? And these are questions that Carol Ann's family has been asking themselves for 38 years. And unfortunately, Carol Ann's parents passed away, not ever knowing if their daughter's case would be solved. And so her family, her sister and her niece, and other members of her family are just wanting to bring their loved one justice. And a little bit, even though I hesitate to say the word closure because you don't really ever get closure,
Right,
as
right.
you know, but some just knowing is a big deal.
You want to end that chapter. We got a question? Or?
What can people do if they recognize this man?
All right. Hey,
question.
that's a great question. So there's a couple things we don't really need the information coming to us because that just adds one more layer to a complex judicial process. We need you to reach out to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office at 630-0500.
Yes.
And then,
Crime
or you can call Crime Stoppers. And with Crime Stoppers in Florida, there's a $3,000 reward, up to $3,000 reward. If it's a murder case, you're pretty well assured you're going to get a $3,000 check if you call it in, if your tip leads
Right.
to the arrest. So Crime Stoppers number is
888-845-TIPS.
Right.
Yes,
right.
and you can stay completely anonymous, and it really is anonymous. Their call center is in Canada. They don't have to take any kind of identifying information.
No,
So, yeah.
people ask that all the time. Well,
Yeah.
how can it be anonymous? They're going to give me money. Well, we've had these conversations with Crime Stoppers over and over because they're constantly battling
Right.
that perception that somehow they need your information to give you the money, and it's simply not true. What they'll do is you give the tip, and you'll be given a code, and you can call back and check that code either online or through the phone. And if your tip was used, then they give you an account number, and you drive to the bank and you make the withdrawal from that account,
Right.
and nobody asks for your ID, and nobody knows any different. You have the access to that money at that point.
And think about it. They're keeping their word, because that is how they're able to solve cases, because a lot of people do not want to be identified. So, imagine if that wasn't true, then they wouldn't be successful. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
they need to stay anonymous.
And there was a case down your way. You're from Miami area.
Yes.
There was an executive director or somebody high up in Crime Stoppers down there that was called to court to testify, and he literally swallowed the piece of paper with the anonymous tips, identification on there. They are protected.
Yes.
They do not have to provide that information. They do not have to provide it, no matter what. Now, that being said, ultimately, your tip may not lead to an arrest if the information is something that has to be used in court. If they were to need you to testify, and you're anonymous, then it's not going to lead to an arrest. There are situations where the tip is good information, but it doesn't give them enough probable cause to make an arrest, and what they would need is somebody that was willing to testify.
Right.
So the Crime Stoppers is great for people that are scared and that want to remain anonymous, but if you're willing to do the right thing to another level and potentially testify against somebody, that's important information to have too. And you can still call that tip in through Crime Stoppers, but you might follow it up with a call to the sheriff's office and let them know that you're the one that called in the tip and that you're willing to speak to them in more detail, or if they need it.
And that's how, if I'm not mistaken, the Kamaya Mobley case got the wheels turning.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a tip called into the National Hotline for Missing and Exploited Children?
Exactly.
And that got everything moving.
Exactly. Kamaya Mobley, for those of you who may not know, was abducted from a hospital here in Jacksonville, Florida, when she was 8 hours old. And she went 18 years.
I believe it was 18 or 19 years?
She, abduction, no idea where she was, who she was with. Pretty sure that who abducted her was taking care of her, and it wasn't, some trafficking thing or anything like that. And they ended up being right with that suspicion. 18 years later, the tip came in, and they found Kamaya Mobley living in South Carolina, raised by a woman claiming to be her mother the entire time. Those tips are really valuable, and that's why we push this partnership with media, with our organization, and with the public, because we recognize that the community is a part of solving these. When we're asked, when the community asks if you see something, to say something, you have a vested interest in our communities, in Jacksonville and in your community, to make it safer. And so that's why we're doing this. We want you to be a part of it. We want you to take pride in making sure these bad guys are off the street and they can't do something to somebody else.
That's the biggest thing. I mean, today could be, the Carol Ann's family, and tomorrow it could be yours or anybody who you know. And it's really our responsibility to just be aware and just call in the anonymous tip. I mean, just try to give a family some justice, some peace of mind, knowing that this person is off the street. And even if your tip doesn't lead to an arrest, or even if you think it's the smallest thing, just call it in.
I was just about to say that, let the investigators decide, if it's correct. We had another case that we did, Vera Sullivan, that you did the story on, and we're going to start following up on all of these cases, and starting. This is the first one we started with to have one of these Facebook Lives, but we'd like to do this regularly and go back to these cases. And Vera Sullivan's case, a tip was called in afterwards, and it didn't lead anywhere. It was not, but somebody took the time, to call in, and it was a similar situation. It was a sketch.
There was a sketch as well, which I'm curious to see if maybe Face Logics can update it. I don't know if the family would want to reach out to them, but
it was a similar situation with a composite, and somebody came forward and said that looks like somebody. I don't know what the tip was.
It's a really well done composite as well.
Yeah, it was. And so, let the detectives decide if that's the same guy. You
Right.
know what I mean? That's
Right.
not
That's
our
their
job.
job.
That's their
Right.
job. They're good at their job. Let's let them do that. We'll do what we do, which is help raise awareness for those cases and get the information out there.
The other thing is that a lot of people think that they're bothering police officers, like, oh, I don't want to, bother them with this information, maybe nothing. Let them decide that. That's very nice of you.
Yeah.
But you're not bothering them. You're really not bothering them. They want to hear from you.
You're not. I mean, these cases are frustrating for them as well. A lot of these detectives are not the original detectives. I mean, 1980 case.
Right.
Those detectives have long since retired from the
Right.
sheriff's office. So these are new detectives that are coming in. A lot of times they're looking at valuable information that was obtained from the previous detective. So, now where do I go? Now
Right.
what do I need to look at?
Exactly.
They need that new bit of information, something to do. Tell you this, a case is only cold when there's nothing left to look at.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you want to keep a case hot. You want to keep a case in the public eye and active. Call in the tips, because as long as they have something to investigate, they will continue to investigate it. It's when they've tested all the evidence, they've talked to all the witnesses, they've run down all the leads, and there's nothing else to look at. That's when a case becomes cold. It's not because it's a year old or 38 years old. It's because there's nothing else to look at. And quite honestly, we want there to be more to look at. And this is a perfect example.
You can attest to how it feels to get that phone call that it's, the case has been suspended.
Yeah. It was as upsetting to me, almost as upsetting as when I found out my dad was murdered, because I never, in all of the scenarios I created in my head and thought through about an arrest happening, and then even kind of, thinking about what if they don't ever make an arrest? What if I never know who killed my dad? The thought never crossed my mind that one day they would sit me down and say, we're not looking for the guy that killed your dad anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's really, really hard to grapple with. Now, when you remove the emotion and you think about it logically, they had tested all the evidence in my dad's case. There were no witnesses, but they tracked down every lead, everything they could do for over a year, almost a year and a half. They dug and tried to find something else to investigate in my dad's case, and they just ran out of things to investigate.
Yeah. They tried. They follow the leads, but that's where the community comes in.
But that's where the community comes in.
And JSO can't do their jobs alone. They
Right.
they say it themselves that it's it's community based. They need the community to help them. And look at all the faces that we have behind us. It's not right that their lives were taken, and potentially there's somebody out there who is just living their life
Right.
while their family is grieving.
We this comes up a lot during the holidays. We did a post about an empty chair, at a table for Thanksgiving dinner. It's the holidays are here, Hanukkah is here, Christmas is coming. A time of celebration and being thankful and recognizing all of the blessings that we have. And we have a lot of families that are trying. It's an internal struggle to acknowledge what you're thankful for, and then to look over and see an empty chair and know that person is gone, and whoever did it is potentially at their Thanksgiving dinner table with their family, enjoying, laughing, and not having to face the consequences for their actions, and so it's important that we help those families that have the empty chair get some feeling of answers and justice. And again, we don't ever use that word closure, but maybe closing that chapter, or the what if, the who,
On the way to healing.
On the way to healing, exactly. And so
a lot of families want to be able to face the person who did this in court and tell them exactly what they did to them, and that's I guess in a sense therapeutic too. Even talking with us when they do the interviews. I've spoken to family members after the interview where they thank me for just listening and for allowing them to share their story. A lot of them, that's what they want to do. They fear that their loved one is going to be forgotten, and they're the only ones who they believe that they're the only ones who remember. And so for them to be able to share their story and have other people know their loved one's name, that's huge.
It is, and that's literally what you just described as the foundation of Project Cold Case. We never want any family to feel like no one else cares. You know, my dad had a lot of friends and a lot of people that loved him. I mean, a lot of people that loved. I mean, he never met a stranger. And I remember one of the you know, online they'll do an obituary, like they'll post it on Jacksonville.com in the obituary, and people can comment on it.
Yes.
And there was a comment that was a gentleman said, I never even knew your name, but as soon as I saw your face in the paper, I recognized you. He described my dad coming to his convenience store every morning during the week and getting a cup of coffee and a newspaper on his way to work and chatting with the gentleman that worked there. And he said, I haven't worked there in years, but I never forgot the conversations we had and forgot your face.
Wow.
And I was, you know, terrified to see and so upset to see him in the paper. And that was kind of the way my dad was. Even with that, you know, everybody has to go back to work and has to go back to living their life, and you don't get the phone calls checking on you. You don't get the phone calls asking if the detectives have found anything, and you start to go to that dark place where you feel like people don't care, and that no one even is worried anymore about it. No one even thinks about them anymore.
The world around you is moving on, but you're still stuck in the same.
You're still stuck, and luckily I have been able to develop some relationships with my dad's friends from back then, you know, that saw me as a little kid, and now we have gatherings and we get together and we're able to share stories. And, you know, for me, that is my favorite thing, is to hear people talk about my dad and talk about him alive. You know, so often when our loved ones are murdered, the focus is on those last moments of their life and how they were killed. And, you know, unfortunately for Carol Ann Barrett, she was only 18. She only had 18 years of life. But so that's what we want to focus on. That was a person who had siblings, who had parents, who had nieces, she had friends. She was just starting her life.
And spring break, how many of us have gone on a spring break trip?
Right,
you know, I mean, that's supposed to be the most fun time, you know, your prime of your youth. And unfortunately, somebody out there, you know, ended her life and potentially is living theirs, maybe with a family, maybe you know, going on with their life.
It's a tough situation for the family to kind of wrap their head around, especially, you know, and then think about how they feel for 38 years. I would imagine this case got some good publicity in 1980. The fact that it was spring break in Daytona, that there was this,
I would think so,
you know,
yes.
Almost hostage situation and you know, abduction.
I mean, that's it's very concerning for parents too, who have kids maybe in spring break at that time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, media was very different back then.
Yes, no social media.
You know, it maybe saw a few television stations and some paper media, some print media.
Right.
It probably was picked up in where she was from and then here locally, but not anything in between, or very little in between. You know, so, but think for 38 years, you know, and the fact that there's not a lot of archived newspaper stories. So, you know, if you're a family member and you want to know what happened to Carol Ann Barrett and you go to Google and you type it in a year ago, you weren't getting anything.
Nothing would really, because even when we were doing the research for the story, I did that and I could not find anything.
Yeah, we couldn't find anything. Now we've got multiple stories from Action News that pop up. We've got this Composite.
Now you see her picture.
You see her picture.
Beautiful young girl. And you see her story and the Composite and the newspaper clipping that you had sent me initially. That was, I think, the only thing that we were able to find. And I wasn't even able to find that on a Google search or anything.
No, it was that was a random find. I think that was a newspaper from somewhere else, from Tampa or something. That you know, I mean, it was luck that someone had scanned that in at some point, and that we were able to find it.
And that's a huge deal for families too, to be able to type in their loved one's name in a search engine and for an updated story to come up. and let people know this case is still unsolved, because a lot of people might think, oh, they must have solved that case.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything on it.
Right.
Must be solved.
Right.
We have another one of those that I hope we can sit down and talk about. That was a local. That was George Schwender. That
Yes.
was, had tons of publicity back then. But that was the one thing the family, when we met with them, they said, we don't understand why when we Google our dad's name, nothing comes up. Well, it was 1970.
It was the same,
right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so
it got a lot of publicity back then.
but none of those papers were archived
Right.
online to
Right.
to be able to see.
And
then,
that's another one that I'm sure got a lot of publicity because it was in broad daylight, a very just an attack that you don't usually hear about, even nowadays.
armored car
armored car.
driver and a robbery in the middle of the daytime.
At a store that a lot of families go to, and there was
in the summer,
a
so
shootout.
kids were out of school.
Right. Right.
I mean, these cases, these are the families that reach out to us that we have been lucky enough to be able to reach out to you
Right.
and get more publicity and get the information out there.
And it's amazing to talk to them too, and to hear them and their memories of what they went through when their father died, how their life completely changed, how all of a sudden they were, kids going to school, and then now they needed to think about how they're going to help, their mom put food on the table.
Yeah, some of those stories were.
Yeah, that marks your life forever. I mean, your life was going in a certain direction. All of a sudden, you don't have a parent anymore, and now you have to maybe potentially drop out of school so you could take a job.
And I remember them talking, we'll get into this when we do the Schwindler, but I remember them saying they had somebody that would, every month, the oldest daughter was responsible for putting all the bills in a manila envelope and then delivering to this gentleman that was a close family friend and worked for the company. And
the company did help them a lot.
And the company,
help the family.
and she said, he never asked questions. He just took that manila envelope and our bills were paid. And you know what
That's
I mean?
amazing. A lot of families don't have that.
No, a lot don't. Yeah.
That help. Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's sad. And I think Carol Barrett's probably one of those families that didn't have, they didn't have a business that was fighting, to help get answers for them. George Schwender had worked for that company for years and years and years.
20 plus years.
Yeah. And so, Carol Barrett's 18 years old, so she didn't have that, and most don't.
Right.
And that's what we want to kind of level the playing field. There are some cases that, for whatever the nature is, get a lot of publicity. It's a serial, offender. If it's a child, they tend to get a lot more. If it's elderly, they tend to get a lot more attention. But there are a lot of just everyday people that are murdered in this country that don't have the means to post an enhanced reward or to keep the I mean, in my dad's case, I had a print reporter tell me one time, I will do a story on your dad's case every year on the anniversary until it's solved. And I think year 4 or 5, he said, I can't do any more for you. I need a new spin. I need something else,
Continue to catch people's attention.
Attention. And so
it's a challenge.
It is a challenge, but we're in a new age of social media now where we can get the information out there.
And if everybody watching this, either right now or later on, can just give it a share, that's really all we would really appreciate that you could do that at the very least. Just share it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what part of the country you're in. Just help us put it out there. And if you're just joining us now, I think it's worth restating the number where they can call.
So if you see that that composite sketch and you recognize that individual, call the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office at 630-0500 or call Crime Stoppers at
1-888-845-TIPS. Yep.
And you can remain anonymous on that one, and there's potential for a $3,000 reward through Crime Stoppers. Clint, did we get anybody commenting any interesting things that we should of note?
Michelle James has been saying hi.
Michelle James.
She's been throwing out her mother's case.
Yeah, so we're gonna we did that one with another station in town, Valerie Ames' case, and hopefully we can do the same thing with that one for Michelle. Hey Michelle, we're glad to see you watching, and we're still fighting for your mom's case too. I mean, when these cases come to us, I can promise you Our goal is to get as many eyes on them as possible and to do as much as we can to try to resolve them. And of course, that's out of our hands. We're not investigators. But the other thing that we want to offer to Michelle and to Carol's family and all the other families is just that network of support with people that have been through something similar. You've heard my story of my dad. Patty, the lead advocate in our office here, her daughter was murdered 14 and a half years ago now in Virginia, and it's still unsolved. There are people in this office that can talk to you and hopefully be a shoulder to cry on and maybe a beacon of hope. And I hear the construction workers getting started behind us.
Yeah,
they gave us a
that.
little bit of a break. But
They're right outside, 2 steps away. Yeah.
If a family has an unsolved case, what can they do, and what can Project Cold Case do for them?
Great
Okay,
question.
yeah, great question. So go to our website, which is projectcoldcase.org. There's a contact button on the top bar, and there's a submit your case tab. Go through that, submit that case. We need that information. We've got to vet these cases through the appropriate law enforcement agencies, and we want a picture of your loved one so that we can put that on our website, so you know that they're somewhere forever for people to go look and know that someone else cares. At that point, we'll try to do a spotlight on your case. If it's a local case, it gets added to a list that we go to Action News with, and we say, here are the cases that are local or that are in our viewing area that the family is interested in doing an interview. Your station has an opportunity to kind of look at them. We also reach out to law enforcement and ask if they would like to have a seat at the table and be a part of that interview process. That creates a better segment when we have law enforcement at the table.
For sure.
And so we're always pushing for that too. That's just one of the ways we can help. We have support meetings here locally in Jacksonville that we invite families to come to. We have events throughout the year. But our big thing is we have a wider net of reaching people. So you can share. I always encourage families to share your own loved one story on your social media.
Absolutely.
But, if you have 300 friends, we have, 4,500, people that like our Facebook page. They're looking at it. You got,
I shared it on
tons.
ours.
Yeah.
And Action News Jax also shares it.
Which has
so-
100,000,
Yes,
followers.
absolutely.
And so our goal and the goal that we share with local media and Action News is to get these cases out there and get them as much attention.
The more the better. The more eyes, the better.
And all of these pictures that you see behind us are on our website. And we have a Faces of Unsolved Homicide page, and you can scroll through all of those. So any of these pictures you see behind us are on our website. They have been submitted by other families, and some of them have been submitted by law enforcement that are looking for help from the public. So those are just a few of the ways. Check out our website. You're on our Facebook page, but we have Twitter and Instagram as well. All of those are Project Cold Case, one word. I think Instagram is Project_Cold_Case. But you find us on social media. We're going to get your loved one's story out there in as many ways as we can. We've published a book that had 22 unsolved cases in it. We do these partnerships with media. I am now traveling more and more and speaking at conferences where I have opportunities to meet people and share stories with people. We get calls from network television shows and production companies regularly. Those were it has to be the right case in the right situation, because we've had some bad experiences with those. But if your loved one's case comes across our desk, they are in consideration for any of those opportunities that come to
Absolutely.
us. We want everybody to have their loved one's story featured.
When you think about how many cold cases there are in the state of Florida, even in Jacksonville alone, it is daunting. There are thousands, and the problem is that also nobody knows what the exact number is.
Right.
And thankfully, you started a database that is starting to get that going, to get an idea of how many cold cases we have, but nobody knows the exact number of how many cold cases there are in Florida.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second. It is mind-boggling to me.
It's
that
absolutely another reason why we even started this organization. Not only do we not know how many there were, but a lot of agencies weren't putting them out on their website.
Right.
So
And-
even
and-
if you had information or you
Right.
thought you had information, you had nowhere to go.
Right. And you know what? It takes a lot of resources to do even what you've been able to do as well. I mean, you
Yeah.
know all the challenges you faced. So, imagine a small police department in whatever county may have a tight budget and may not have enough manpower to make it happen. So it is a challenge for them as well.
Absolutely.
But that's where we all have to put our heads together and figure this out, because it's crazy to me that the backlog is so large.
Yeah, I think on our database, which is again on our website, I think we have almost 1,500 from Duval County alone, and 7,700 overall,
And
the
counting.
majority of and growing literally every month. Clint does an update on our database and adds anywhere from 20 or 30 more to 300 more,
Right.
400 more.
Every murder in our city has the potential of being a cold case.
Yeah.
If people don't come
absolutely.
forward.
And that's why it's important. And on our database, I think we're only to 2016, I think, cases in our database, like pretty much. There's a couple 2017s, but we always give law enforcement at least a year
Right.
grace period to try to solve a case
Right.
before we put it on our website. So we're talking cases, and we're not talking about cases from 1910 or 1911 that are historically not going to be,
Historic,
the suspect's dead, most of the family's gone,
They go into a
witnesses are all
different
gone.
category.
They go into a
Yeah.
different category. But we have seen results from multiple 1970s cases, from
Yes.
the early mid 70s, and even some 1960s cases. So cases like that we welcome, and we will add. We'll add it if the family wants it, even if it was older than that. But the reality of solving a case, the problems with how evidence was collected
Right.
in
Run into those
1960,
issues.
yeah.
They did things differently back then.
They did things differently. They had no idea that DNA would be a
Right.
tool for solving crimes.
But it's
So-
amazing to see the detectives that are forward thinking and say,
And
you know what, let me save this palm print, although they had no way to test it back
Right,
then.
exactly.
But they saved it, which
They
is
did.
amazing, and we're able to test it now. So,
Yeah, exactly. So there are hurdles. We have to remember that those old cases had, old witnesses that, if somebody was a 70-year-old witness in 1974,
Right.
they're not going to be available to the state now to prosecute, which is also why it's so important that if you have information, get it to us sooner rather than later.
Right.
We have cases that have been resolved where the suspect is deceased, and that's not the perfect scenario for a family. Typically, they want their day in court, but to finally know who did it
Right.
is important, and to know that person can't do it to somebody else's family. Those are important things. So,
And police still want to know, even if the person, let's say the person may be incarcerated or the person may be deceased, they still want to be able to close that and put the
clear
solved
that
stamp
case.
on it.
Yeah, exactly. And it is important for the family to know who did it. So even in those cases that we know the suspect is probably not alive anymore, it's equally as important that they know who did it, to us at least. So
And we're talking also, and I mean, it's obviously every murder is violent, but we're talking about really violent suspects who, in the Ann Barrett case, kidnapped a young lady from a room with other people, and she was found, and it's in the story, and I think it's important that these details are important because these are the people that we're dealing with that are out there. She was found half nude on the side of the highway, and the detective on the case said that it almost looked like she had been executed. When you think about those details, these are people that need to be off the street,
Right.
and we need your help to be able to find them and put them away.
absolutely. I mean, can you imagine? And we're not trying to scare everybody.
Right,
I
right.
have kids too. And I deal with this stuff on a daily basis. But this is reality. This is not made up.
And these details
television.
are important. We do have to talk about this because it's part of the problem we're dealing with.
Yeah. But can you imagine the fear of a poor 18-year-old girl that came to Florida to have fun,
Right.
being executed on the side of the road, or being executed and dumped on the side of the road? I mean, it's these victims deserve justice, and their families deserve answers. And we're going to do all we can with the partnerships we have and the help that we have. We're going to do all we can to get those for them, and and we're not always going to get them, and we understand that, but we're going to try, and we're going to do our part, and I'm proud to be a part of an organization that is willing to do that. But we do need your help. I tell people all the time, I'll go and speak in front of a large group, and inevitably somebody raises their hand and they say, well, what can I do to help? And I know what they're thinking I'm going to say is donate money, because we're a nonprofit, and that's what nonprofits always ask for is money. But I catch them off guard and I go, the easiest thing you could do won't cost you a dime, and it could be the difference between solving a case and not, and that is go to our Facebook page and like it, go to our Twitter and follow us, Instagram, and comment, like, share. I mean, the more engagement a post gets in social media, the more people see it. So
exactly. That's the goal.
That's the goal. And we don't know how many people we're going to have to get through seeing this to find the one that knows who that guy is. But that's our challenge, and we're up to it. We'll try it, but we need your help. So think about that when you're thinking about ways that you can help a family. Be engaged in these posts and these Facebook Lives. Make a comment, ask a question, share it. Tune in again. That is the difference when we start getting rolling, and if something goes viral. That could be the difference in solving a case. And
I know this topic is difficult to talk about, and it's
when we do recognize that let's be honest, most of us use our Facebook world as a world where we're free of of pain and anger, and everybody lives a happy life on Facebook. There's no arguments, and most of us. There's some people that like the social media drama, but typically, it's not somewhere where we go and want to talk about murder and violence.
But it's a valuable tool that we need to use.
It is.
That's what we're doing. So
that is.
Doing our part.
That's right. Exactly. Anything else before we sign off? I think we've done a good.
Yeah.
Adam? Okay.
Yeah.
Lorena, how can people find you? And then we'll, if you want to, we can put the composite back up, wrap up, and play the segment again.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Perfect. You can find me on Facebook, Lorena Inclan, Action News Jax, just like that, Lorena Inclan, Action News Jax. You can also find me on Twitter, Lorena AN Jax. Also on Instagram, Lorena Inc. I know it's a lot to remember, but you can always rewind and listen to it again.
Yeah.
So that's where you can find me.
Yeah, if you have a story, if you have a case that you would like to see something like this done, and if it's a local case or has a local connection, Carol Ann Barrett, her family was not local, but because the murder happened here, we were able to to do that case on your station. You can email Lorena, but usually those come through our submit a case that I told you about earlier. Go to our website, click contact, submit a case. If it's in this viewing area, it automatically goes on a list of cases that we keep, that we present to law enforcement and to Lorena and Action News in an attempt to make a selection that will work. It works best if the family's willing to do an interview and cooperate. Our goal is, the reason there's a Faces of Unsolved Homicide is because we want to break this feeling that the only people that are murdered are gang members and drug dealers. That's not true. Those are not the only people that experience murder. And so we want everybody to have equal time, and get their case and their story out there. So if you submit the case to us, it's going to go on that list. There are those kinds of criteria that we're going to look at. Is the family willing to do an interview? It just does better if the people in the community can relate. And that was my point about these cases. When you see these faces, there's somebody on this board that looks like your cousin or your child or your grandparent. And, and we want there to be a relationship with the viewer, that they're going to want to share this, that they're going to want to call in that tip.
And my job as a journalist is to tell a story. And of course, nobody can tell me more about their loved one than the the family members, you know, I can go on and talk about that person, but obviously I never knew that person. I, you know, didn't have a relationship with them. So that's why we really want to talk to family members so we can get a better idea of what their loved one did, what kind of person they were, and really share those details with us that will help us tell a better story at the end of the day.
Exactly. And I always tell, reporters and families that, like I mentioned earlier, our loved one is typically defined by their death. And so the whole story is about their murder, but there's all these years prior and these memories that we have. And this gives you an opportunity to tell who this person was, not how they died. That'll be in the story. Obviously, that's the key component. But yes. Who were they? Why is it important that we find justice for them? And that needs to be told by the loved one, by loved ones, And
also, how has your life changed since then? Because I don't think a lot of people realize how much your life completely changes. And I've spoken to family members who took on a different career or took on a different mission. Maybe you started this nonprofit,
right.
Because of that defining moment.
Ask my wife about the changes, from October 10th, 2009, when literally in the driveway of our home, detectives told us that my dad had been murdered. This is, I promise you, not where she thought we would be, 9 years later.
It's not where
it's not where I thought I would be. And I talk about it all the time. I know my dad did not want to be the poster child for unsolved murder, but here we are. I know that he would be proud that that something good came of it. The fact that I can offer some kind of hope to people that have experienced this warms my heart. It makes it worth it. It makes the late nights and the struggles well worth it. And I know we have this conversation with Clint all the time, Patty. We're doing the right thing for the right reasons, and as long as we're doing that, then the opportunities will continue to come. The funding side of stuff that we have to deal with will continue to come. Our focus is on these cold cases and these families, and I'm
sure you can agree that when we see the billboards or the commercials where the word cancer is crossed out, a lot of these hospitals or organizations that try to find a cure to cancer, they would love to be able to take that word out of there, because then that would mean there's a cure and we don't have to deal with this anymore. I'm sure you would have loved to see a world where you don't need to have a Project Cold Case, because that means that cases get solved.
I will gladly go back to to my old life in architecture if there were no more cold cases. And we're going to do what we can to resolve them one at a time, because we're talking about a big undertaking.
Right.
And
just in the state of Florida.
Just in the state of Florida.
Imagine the rest of the country.
I mean, you go 1,500 in Jacksonville, probably 15,000 in Florida, and 230 to 240,000 in the country. I mean, that it could be overwhelming.
It is, yeah.
But we're going to do a little bit at a time, with each case one at a time. We appreciate the patience with our families when they submit a case. I mean, we have a lot of cases that we're trying to do something special for each one of them and provide these opportunities. And sometimes I know it takes longer than you'd hope or that you think it would take.
I wish we could do a case every single day. I mean, that would be great.
Exactly. We're doing the best we can, I promise you, with what we have. And we're going to start, doing these regularly, and we're going to have you back, and we're going to, we'll I know people don't want to look at me for the whole hour, so we'll bring in some new faces and some interesting perspectives.
Yep. Maybe even law enforcement if they're
maybe
willing.
Maybe even law enforcement.
Or DNA specialists. That's a whole nother Facebook Live to talk about ancestry DNA and all that. That's a whole nother.
That would be huge. And I don't want to obviously speak for anyone that they would come in and talk to us, but we have some good relationships with some elected officials in law enforcement, the state attorney, and so
open invitation.
And I know that some of those will do their best to come speak with us, and we welcome that. And so we're gonna thank you for tuning in and watching, and please share this. Please tune in again. We'll try to give you a little warning next time. I realized this morning on my way in that I didn't post anything that we were going to do this today.
Yeah, I tried to give
and then
a
you
warning,
did,
like
and I tried to
15 minutes before, but I think we need probably a little bit more.
And I tried to share it. But the beauty of Facebook Live is that you can go back and
Yes.
watch it later. We're going to show the composite one more time and ask you again if you this is you are looking at the person that abducted and murdered Carol Ann Barrett in 1980. And if he looks like anybody you knew in 1980, please call again the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. If you're out of town, it's area code 904-630-0500, or the First Coast Crime Stoppers is 1-888-845-TIPS. And again, a call through them is eligible for up to a $3,000 reward. So take a good look at that. Share that image. Share our page.
Like the page.
Engage in
yes,
it somehow.
Engage, yes.
So that more people see it and it shows up in their feed. And I think, Lorena, thank you so much on your day off. Like, you don't have to sit in front of a camera enough anyway.
That's okay. This is really, really important, and I'm just proud to be a member of the board for Project Cold Case and trying to do.
Thank you for everything you do, and to
thing.
Raul too, who has
Thank
been
you.
a huge supporter of ours. And we really appreciate everything you guys do. We're gonna sign off again. We'll hope to give you a little more heads up next time.
Next time for sure. And we'll highlight another case.
We'll highlight another case, but projectcoldcase.org to take a look to submit a case. And thanks so much. We'll catch up with you next time.
News Jax first told you about the murder of 18-year-old Carol Ann Barrett last year. Her case has not been solved, and now a new photo could make the difference. Action News Jax Lorena Inclan shows us how technology could help solve this cold case.
Take a look at this sketch. Action News Jax showed it to you last year in November. And now, look at this one. A new and improved composite of the same suspect. It's all thanks to St. Augustine-based FaceLogix.
Basically, what we're looking for is the points of the face, and we're almost going to do like a manual facial identification.
This is the person JSO says is suspected of killing 18-year-old Carol Ann Barrett during a spring break trip in Daytona Beach. Her body was found off of I-95 near Jacksonville's airport. For Carol's niece, Claire Gilligan, this new composite changes everything.
It definitely looks like an actual person. It's not just, a pencil and paper, kind of thing. I actually thought it looked a lot like my aunt's ex-boyfriend.
FaceLogix showed us how many other composites they've created that have been successful. The St. Augustine Police Department already works with FaceLogix on some of its cases, and Rousseau tells me it's been working with departments across the state of Florida and also some federal agencies as well.
So even for smaller agencies, they now have those resources that they wouldn't have before.
38 years later, Barrett's death is still impacting her family, including Gilligan's children.
I don't let certain things happen. I'm very cautious.
Take another good look at this photo. The features are very distinct, down to the mole and even the clothing he may have been wearing.
What if it's your family? Wouldn't you want closure? Wouldn't you want someone to speak out?
Lorena Inclan, CBS 47, Fox 30, Action News Jax.
I mean, hopefully one day we'll bump into each other and it'll
probably
be fun.
at the event in January.
Oh, yeah.
Because I did invite her.